So welcome, yes, welcome everybody. I hope I hope the schedule's working and that you can cook and eat and do everything else that you need to do during the day. I'm very fortunate in that living in a community, I pretty much get all my meals made for me and I didn't have to do very much, but so it's quite a treat. Very good to see you all zooming in. So yes, I just wanted to say, I hope the retreat's having an effect, a positive effect, that it's working for you. I certainly feel that I'm on retreat and that it's starting to have an effect. And I hope that the same is happening for you. So tonight we're going to continue with our sort of one of the team. Well, tonight it's Vessantara giving a personal account of his relationship with these myths, with meditation and these myths. And then, well, we'll see what time we have. Vessantara will do something devotional, I'm sure. So I want to say a little bit to not exactly introduce Vessantara because he doesn't need introducing to any of you, but I just want to rejoice in him. And it's a lovely opportunity for me to be able to do that. I regard Vessantara as one of my teachers and also as a friend. It's not that we see each other that often or talk even that often, but I feel he's taken me on somehow, and I feel very grateful for that. I feel he's guided me in a way in my inner life. I was going to say meditation, but I mean more in that sort of mythic sense. And I feel very grateful to have a guide like Vessantara in our midst. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. In fact, I know I'm not the only one. He is a great friend to a lot of people. And one of the things I think I was thinking about well, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Vessantara is his kindness. He seems to exude kindness, doesn't he? A warmth that's very penetrating, that sees very clearly, I feel seen very clearly, but with a lot of empathy, with a great deal of sensitivity and kindness to my welfare, to my needs, a great sort of attentiveness combined with this perception. And I feel with Vessantara, of course, it's not just well, I mean, I'm sure he's a kind man, just at an ordinary human level, but I feel that it comes from, well, from wisdom. I think this is what wisdom looks like in when it's embodied in the world. It expresses itself as kindness, and Vessantara's kindness, I think, has this particular quality of penetrating clarity. You can see something of this in his writings as well. I was just re-looking at Tales of Freedom recently, and it's such a beautiful book. You can see in his writing this penetrating clarity, this wisdom, you could say, coupled with a warmth and empathy for the human condition. It's a very, very beautiful quality. And for me, there's more than just even that sort of kindness coupled with wisdom. I think it might be to do with Vessantara's name, but when I think of him, the word that comes to mind is a magician. He feels to me something of a magician. I mean, I feel, I kind of know that he's in touch with deeper, higher planes of existence. You could say deeper, higher perceptions, ways of experiencing the world. And I feel that he is at play with those forces in in the universe. I don't completely know what I'm talking about, but I know, for example, that when him and Vijayamala were doing their 3-year retreat, he said that we could send him names of people that we wanted him to bear in mind, and he would be sending them metta. And I just feel with Vessantara, I have complete confidence in his ability to do that, to affect the world, us, at a level that isn't just to do with the ordinary senses, our sense experience. So that's what I mean by a magician. I think he's in touch with the Dharma in a very, very deep way that has an effect in the world, in a very tangible but also very subtle way. And one of the qualities I think that he brings to our Sangha, in a way, is a sort of a quality that's got a touch of magic, is that I think he's got a harmonizing presence, a deeply harmonizing presence. He sort of seems to be able to bring people together, and people feel confident. We feel, I suspect, confident in his understanding of the Dharma, his penetration of the deeper aspects of the mind. But more than that, he seems to somehow be able to, with great skill, harmonize, in a way, differences in the order. I think he brings a higher perspective to bear. And I think we really need that. For me, Vessantara is one of our elders. And when I think that Bhante is no longer physically present, I think our elders are even more precious, perhaps, than they ever were. Vessantara, who's been ordained almost 50 years, is definitely an elder. Of course, it's not just the length of time that one is ordained, but the depth of one's practice that really matters. And I think in Vessantara, we are fortunate in having somebody who can really, well, inspire and guide us. So I'm very, very pleased to be on a team with Vessantara, to have an opportunity of working alongside him. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Vessantara has to say about his own practice this evening. I hope you are too. I'm just going to hand over to Vessantara.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Jnanavacya. Yes, I rejoice in the fact that I have you as a friend in my life as well. It means a lot to me. So, last night we were given sort of privileged access to the practice of Vijayamala, and I felt very fortunate to be given that opportunity and that insight into somebody who's such a wise, a diligent practitioner who's continued through all sorts of difficulties and feels to me as if spiritually kind of triumphed over so much and therefore has so much to offer to everyone else. And she talked about stages that she'd gone through in her practice, starting with escape, sort of wanting to escape from suffering. And I'm going to sort of probably just reminisce around, and hopefully some of the stages of my Dharma journey will unfold as we go through. I suspect I may have to leap over large numbers of them because, as Jnanavacya said, I've been practicing for a long time now. So unlike Vijayamala, I don't think to start with in my Dharma life, or my first feelings towards what turned into my Dharma life, were motivated by suffering. I think I had a lot of dukkha, but it was well buried, it was well swept under the carpet. So I was very much drawn towards the sort of beauty and richness of awakening and enlightenment. In fact, I think from quite an early age, I was trying to meditate before I knew anything about it. And certainly in my teens, I discovered if I walked really sort of slowly and was very sort of present, that I'd get into this sort of different state. And there were a number of things like that I did. I used to stare at light bulbs and things. But I was definitely, looking to be sort of illumined in some sort of way. And finally, in my mid-teens, I came across a book on yoga. I didn't know what yoga was, but it had an outline of a meditator. And although I didn't know what yoga was, I somehow knew I had to have this book. And that sort of gradually sort of led me in the direction of taking up formal meditation. And the first formal meditation that I did was actually transcendental meditation, which was very popular. This would have been, when was this? I was 18. It was the beginning of 1969, I think. I was at university, and the Beatles had been doing transcendental meditation. So I took it up, and it was very simple, and there was just a mantra that you dropped into the mind and relaxed with. And so I think my first introduction, in a way, to one of our myths that we're talking about on this retreat was very much to do with following this mantra down into the depths of the mind and discovering their sort of deeper experience. So it's like my first meditation practice was a sort of discovery myth, really. You weren't encouraged to make an effort other than just come back to the mantra. You just relaxed and relaxed and relaxed. But then, I started reading more and more about Buddhism, and I was really drawn to the Dharma and felt that it was really true. And first found my way to a Tibetan centre in Scotland, and then to one of ours, just about our only centre in London at the beginning of 1973. And there, Vajradhaka, whom some of you will know, would teach mindfulness of breathing and metta bhavana. And listening to him teach those, they seemed like quite hard work. So I would sit down the back and do my transcendental meditation mantra and get very blissed out. And it was only after I realized that I was going to get seriously involved with this group of what was to become Triratna that I thought, I'd better really kind of get used to their meditations. And I found both the mindfulness and breathing and the metta very hard work to start with. Much more so than the TM mantra. But I realized that the TM mantra, although it was relaxing me, I wasn't really getting any more awareness of myself. And mindfulness, breathing, and metta, although they were hard work for me, they brought into awareness aspects of myself that I hadn't really known. So I worked away with those. And again, like Vijayamala, I really strove. I really put a lot of energy into them and into gaining enlightenment as soon as possible. With the result that there was a lot of willfulness there. I remember after I was ordained in 1974, occasionally we'd have the day sessions at the centre with Subhuti and Deva Mitra and Kamalashila and me. And for me, they were alienation intensives. By lunchtime, I had a sort of real headache, and then it just got worse as the afternoon went on. But I sat, and I sat, and I sat. So I don't think that development as I did it back then felt like my myth. I don't think it's anybody's myth, really, done in that way. But when I look back now, all those sort of things which felt like they were weren't done very well, the practice wasn't, I was doing it in the wrong way. All those were learnings, and actually they all had an effect. And I can see that even those practices that I did in that not very helpful way, they were still very helpful. if you see what I mean. I don't know what it would have been like if I'd just come along more recently and perhaps had practiced years and years with just those two practices. I'm not sure if I would have had the staying power. But thankfully, back in those days, often you were ordained really quickly. Yeah. So I came along at the beginning of 1973, and in August 1974, I was ordained and was given a sadhana. And also Bhante gave me my name, Vessantara, which means universe inside. And when he gave it to me in the private ordination, he gave it to me as a sort of precept. He said, you don't need to look outside yourself for anything. Everything that's really important, even enlightenment itself, is all within you. Which again felt very much like a go find it, just go find it. It was more discovery. Yeah? And I felt as if something in me was really affirmed, that there was a sort of richness waiting to be unfolded. And I came out of the little wooden hut where I'd been ordained, with that sense of affirmation, but then also with the Padmasambhava mantra. And so that I'd already been practicing sort of puja and mantra and things like that as one of the very early mitras, but sadhana really sort of opened things out for me. I think I'd realized already that I think part of my picture of spiritual unfoldment was a kind of cooperation between conscious me, what I thought of as me, and sort of like deeper forces in mind. And it felt as if the Padmasambhava practice gave me a way of being directly in contact with those deeper forces, and gradually unfolded over a long period of time. So that was very much a sort of other power approach. I was just opening to Padmasambhava as much as possible, and then subsequently I started doing Tara practice. And I think there was a long period of my life then where, although I still had this discovery myth sort of in the background, really I was practicing surrender. I was practicing surrender to Padmasambhava, to Tara, to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And I was also doing my best to write myself as a sort of blank check for Bhante. I was practicing guru devotion, so I was I would go to him and say, well, what do you want me to do next? And whatever that was, I would do it. And that led me to eventually being Bhante's secretary for about 6 years. So yes, maybe before I get to Bhante's secretary, there's one other experience that I just want to mention, because I feel it's been absolutely sort of central to my Dharma life with hindsight. So it's 1977. I've been ordained for 3 years, so I'm a fairly senior order member by this point. I'm living in Aryatara, which is quite a nice house in the leafy suburbs of Purley near Croydon, south of London. And we're holding activities. And one evening, there's going to be a Mitra study group in the front room. And Nagabodhi, who's the chair of the centre, is going to lead it, and I'm supporting him. And we've got a small handful of Mitras. So we go in, and there's a shrine there, and we start into doing 20 minutes mindfulness of breathing before we do the study of, I can't remember what, some of Bhante's material. So from starting off feeling quite a little bit distracted, it's as if at a certain point, my mind just drops, and there's still thinking going on, but the thoughts are like, you know, if you stand on a station platform and there's a freight train and it goes by, you know, there's this incredible sense of the weight of all these kind of carriages, you know, and they're sort of rumbling along, and there's just a lot of sort of sense of power and weight. So it's like the thoughts that were going through my mind were like that. And there were they revolved around two issues. First one was seeing very, very clearly that even if I could manage to somehow find the way to wisdom for myself and free myself from suffering, I would still feel like someone sitting in a palace surrounded by slums and desert with other people just suffering and suffering. And I could never be happy like that. I could only ever be happy if I took down the walls of the palace and expanded the whole thing until everyone was included. And the second one was, I think, probably sparked by bits of study I'd done with Bhante on one or two of the songs of Milarepa, which was that it was all about mind and awareness, and how awareness and appearances are completely inseparable. So experience always has these two aspects. There's appearances, which are, when you look into it, are actually awareness, and awareness which is always appearing. So, and you could never separate them out. It's a very sort of Mahamudra Dzogchen view of things. Anyway, those two themes just went, and my mind just dropped into them. And then after a few minutes, the last bell of this little 20-minute mindfulness of breathing went, and everyone got up and sat in a circle, and I couldn't move. So they were sitting around me, and Naga Bodhi was very easy about it. He said, well, I'm sitting right in the middle, as it happens, of this circle now. I just happened to end up there. So Naga Bodhi says, well, no, let's just start. It doesn't seem like Vessantara is quite ready to come out of meditation. So there's this study group going on around me, and part of me is just completely in what's actually compassion and wisdom. And another part of me is kind of trying to respond to this call of the Sangha by hauling myself back out to, support Naga Bodhi in the study group. Anyway, looking back, I can see that, what happened in that 20 minutes little mindfulness of breathing, really just, they're the two kind of themes of my life, really. It's sort of, that bodhicitta of open heart, and that wisdom aspect of non-duality. The what we think of as the observing awareness and the appearances that are being observed, completely inseparable. Okay, so going on a bit, I ended up as Bhante's secretary for 6 years, and in that time, as I said, I was trying to, as it were, surrender not so much to Bhante, the personality, but to the vision, the Dharma that came through him. And a lot of us didn't have the good fortune to see Bhante, more in his prime. You sort of see more sort of videos of sort of an elderly gentleman, and it's hard to realize just how much energy he had, and just how much Dharma seemed to sort of flow through and around him wherever he was. It didn't really matter what was going on. I was working as his secretary, he could be asking me to write a letter, or he could be writing his memoirs, or talking about going to see somebody. There was another level with Bhante, very, very strong. And so in opening to him, it's as if I was surrendering into that sort of Dharma current, and it affected me in all sorts of ways. For instance, one night while I was being Bhante's secretary, I had a dream where I was asking Bhante about Yabgyung figures, about these tantric, highest tantra figures, with with consort, a male figure with a female consort, or vice versa, which are on one level are about the union of wisdom and compassion. And so I was asking him, are Yabjum figures one figure or two? And in the dream, he sort of pointed at me and he said, they're one figure. And you'll realize that when you become really absorbed. And this sort of kind of like piece of Dharma and this sort of pointing figure really affected me. So in the dream, I burst into flames. And not only did I burst into flames, but I became this red Yidam protector figure, Hayagriva, who is Yabjum. So the dream ended, and it had, a very strong effect on me. And so I told Bhante about it, and he said, "Oh, it's it sounds like something transcendental, sort of breaking through." But I didn't feel like I'd done anything to break through to the transcendental. I just felt that I'd kind of opened myself to the Dharma. I'd opened myself to Padmasambhava and Tara and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I'd opened myself to my teacher, and it was just the result of that. So yes, a very strong lot of experiences. And also, we're in the 80s now, and I've got to watch the time closely. I led a whole lot of ordination courses, and very often, although Bhante would give different people who've been ordained their mantra, one of the ordination team, which was different every time, would instruct people in their practice, and they were quite small teams, and so often there were people who, I didn't have a team member who was good at a particular practice, which meant that I had to, as the leader of all those ordination courses, I kind of learnt to be able to introduce people to the whole range, really, of practices that were done in the order. And out of that came Bhante's suggestion that I write Meeting the Buddhas, which then involved me in kind of doing even more, not so much research. Before the final draft, I had to do some research to fill in the gaps, but it was more like just really dwelling on each of these figures. And at that time, when I wrote the first draft, I was living at Kukyaloka, very quietly in a little community. And so I just, with whatever figure I was writing about, I would just spend time doing the mantra and opening myself to that figure. So all that part of my life was very much about this opening, surrendering to the deep currents of the Dharma embodied in all these different figures. Okay, so then that still brings us to about 30 years ago, doesn't it? So I'm going to pass pretty swiftly over the next 30 years. I think going into the 2000s, the whole discovery myth started to become stronger and stronger again. That non-duality of, that seeing through the illusion of subject and object became very important to me. And I started, I never actually went looking for any other teachers, but other teachers started being kind of brought to me. So I ended up doing 3 years retreat, for instance, guided by a German Tibetan Lama called Lama Tilman Lundrup, who I'd never heard of, but who'd been invited to a seminar at Majmaloka. And I got invited on the seminar, and I think on day 4, I said to him, "Would you guide me in a 3-year retreat?" To which he said, "Yes, sure." So yes, this period of the 2000s, and then coming back in 2011 and doing a whole lot of teaching and continuing my practice in more recent years, it's felt as if this is more about discovery and emergence. And I suppose more and more emergence as time has gone on. So what can I say about my practice now? I find it easy to talk about my practice 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Talking about now, it's a bit like kind of, trying to sum up history when you're still living it, It's still unfolding very, very much. But in terms of what I do, in terms of meditation practice, I still practice a lot of sadhana, and I do a lot of just sitting. Those are the two things that I focus on. But it's very hard to talk about, but it feels as if the sadhana and the just sitting are essentially the same practice. It doesn't really matter what sadhana I'm doing. All the figures are just different expressions of the same reality, just with different flavors, different. When I first did sadhana, it felt like, they were all really different. They took me into different worlds. Now it doesn't feel like that, really. It feels like I'm always in the same open dimension of mind. And so the sadhanas just seem to be a kind of patterning of mind. And the sadhanas that I do, I still do the Padmasambhava sadhana sometimes. So he's still, as it were, out there. Although I think somebody yesterday morning in Jnanavajra's session said that inside and outside didn't really quite mean anything very much to them. Yeah, for me, they don't really mean very much. They're sort of provisional distinctions that are useful. So it doesn't really matter whether I'm doing a practice of Padmasambhava out there, I'm doing a practice of Tara or Avalokiteshvara, as it were, in here. It doesn't really matter if there's no figures at all and there's just the open dimension of things. It feels as if, on a good day at least, some days I can still be struggling with prapancha, but on a good day at least, it feels as if the qualities of awakening are everywhere. They're sort of love and compassion and wisdom are just sewn into the fabric of all experience. And it's really just a question of allowing that to happen. That is just how it is. So when things are like that, it doesn't feel as if there's anyone surrendering to anything. It doesn't really feel as if anyone is trying to develop anything. The just sitting isn't a practice in order to go anywhere. The sadhana isn't a practice in order to go anywhere. It's just, it's some sort of channel. If it's anything, it's a channel for this great love and compassion and wisdom and freedom and patience and generosity, all those qualities of the mind when it's freed from selfing. It's just a channel for those to go out into the world, to go out into the universe. So on a good day with a following wind, there's that's what the practice is about, really. It's just about those qualities going out into the world. It's like, in some way, being a channel for those deeper qualities. So I'm really pleased that Subhuti called pointed to the fact that these three myths are just three myths, because it feels more and more to me as if, although discovery and emergence might be closest, none of them sort of somehow are right. None of them really almost have anything to do with how things are. They're like the rest of the Dharma. They're all just ways of helping us along in the right direction. So yeah, I don't know if that gives you any kind of a feeling of anything, but I suppose if I finally boil down what my practice is about, it still comes out of the the sitting room at Aryatara. It still comes out of that sense of non-separateness, which means that we're all not separate, and because of that, that bodhicitta and the bodhisattva ideal are the only way finally to live. They're the only way finally that we'll be fulfilled. That love and compassion, that great love and compassion, is sewn into the fabric of things. And let's go find it. Let's go unfold it. Individually, together, as an order, as true Ratna. That's my best shot for this evening, I think, in saying something about my practice. Okay, so, sorry, that was quite a lot of words, but there we are. So let's finish with, let's give ourselves a little bit of time to meditate. And I think before we do, I'm just going to read a few lines from our Bodhicharyavatara Puja. The last few lines, they just feel like a way into meditation. And so we won't do them call and response. We can just let them sink into our heart. And then we'll just sit, and I'll ring a bell at 8:30, my time, our time, over here. Just let most of you get settled. Very good to see you all. As long as the existence of space, and as long as the existence of time, that long may my life be devoted to the world's sorrows. only medicine for this suffering world. May the teaching of the Buddha, with all honor and glory, endure till the end of time. So that's it for today. Go very well, and tomorrow we move into surrender. So, all the best until then.